SD-WAN customer case studies. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please enter those questions at any time in the Ask a Question box below. We will monitor these questions throughout our webinar and answer them at the end of the webinar. You can also download the slides from today's broadcast in addition to 3 case study papers at any time by clicking the Attachments tab below. The webinar is also being recorded and will be available to view on demand immediately following today's live broadcast. Now let's get started. My name is Michael Wood, CMO with Versa Networks. I'm joined today by Kelly Ahuja, Chief Executive Officer for Versa Networks. Welcome to today's live broadcast, Kelly. Thank you for leading today's topic, and it's great to have you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, and a really exciting topic to cover, which is actual real-world examples of how customers in different verticals are using Versa and what challenges they're solving with them. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation and with the audience today. As Mike said, please do continue to send us your questions, and we'll try and cover those questions either during the session or at the end as we go through the remaining questions as well. So let's get started, Mike. Mike, everyone talks about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Fundamentally, what enterprises are doing is they're actually on focusing, accelerating a journey to digital transformation. And as they do that, we're their partner of choice for transforming the business of networking. But let's talk about what enterprises are really trying to achieve. As part of the digital transformation, they're really trying to focus on creating a reliable and secure user experiences for the model where applications and workloads are in the cloud and the users are coming from anywhere and everywhere. And candidly, what they want to be able to do is provide these user to app or client to cloud experiences across the entire enterprise. So secure, reliable, scalable is the focus that we continue to hear from customers. And what they're trying to get to do is get on a journey to build and create the software-defined enterprise where when they create these client-to-cloud experiences, they're not just doing it for remote users or branch users, they're doing it across the entire enterprise. And that's the journey that they're on, and that's where we are helping customers on that journey.
So Kelly, this webinar is very focused on secure SD-WAN. What are some of the, what are the reasons why people are actually implementing secure SD-WAN?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Mike, and let me cover that, which is on the following, which is as enterprises are moving more workloads to SaaS and multi-cloud, what they want to be able to do is connect their users directly to those. Why? Because the on-ramp for many of these clouds and SaaS is the internet. And when they do go and leverage these capabilities in these SaaS and cloud multi-cloud networks, with the internet becoming the on-ramp, the user should be able to get onto the on-ramp from anywhere and everywhere. And when you do that, what you need to do is make sure that to deliver reliability and security and scalability, you have actually both network and security fundamentally infused together. But there are certain things that they're looking for, which is one, security becomes a fundamental and a crucial part of any SD-WAN discussion that we have with the customer. Why? Because today's model is a centralized on-ramp to those clouds, to the internet, through a centralized internet. And that becomes a bottleneck. So every enterprise wants to be able to figure out how they can actually expand that perimeter, the internet perimeter for the organization to provide direct on-ramps to multi-cloud and SaaS. The second thing is that every environment out there isn't a greenfield, it's actually a brownfield environment. So they want a solution that comes in and fits into the existing environment smoothly. Whether it's routing protocols or NAT or DHCP or other capabilities that they have in the existing network, you've got to just plug into the network as if you were an element from prior technologies and then provide a migration path to the future. And clearly with SD-WAN, every enterprise wants all the capabilities and bells and whistles that they need to be able to build this next generation infrastructure. But a few key things that we continue to hear from customers. One is that of genuine multi-tenancy. And this is really important, and I think, in fact, I think you have a webinar coming up on this topic that I'll guide the audience to listen to soon. Why? Because multi-tenancy is really about segmentation, and segmentation is a way of enforcing security in a scalable way by building it into the infrastructure, as opposed to having security elements that are placed in certain places in the network, and then you try and build out the security architecture that way. And in this isolation, the segmentation is needed to isolate front office from back office, guests from corporate, or different lines of businesses. And we'll go through some of the examples of that as we go through the case studies. And the next part is, in this client-to-cloud model, users are connecting directly to cloud as well as to corporate resources. Now, this makes it challenging for the network operations and the network engineering team to know what's going on in the network and when, and especially not when things are going well, but when things go wrong. So they want to be able to have sophisticated visibility inside the network through a analytics infrastructure where they can actually know exactly who the user is, what sessions there are, where the traffic is going, and be able to leverage that information to optimize the experience that the end user gets. And lastly, what we continue to hear from customers is that they don't necessarily they want a software-defined model, not a hardware-defined model. So they want a solution that's software-centric, that is hardware-agnostic, not just at the branch, but also in the cloud. They want it to be able to sit into any cloud and be able to create that client-to-cloud experience very simply and easily. So now if you take a look at what this means, what enterprises are trying to do is get on this journey. And the journey is towards SASE. I tell people that we're classy and we are SASE at Versa. Why? Because SD-WAN is really the tip of the spear. That's what's driving most of the conversation when customers come to us today. But the minute we get into the conversations, we realize, and customers realize, that along with SD-WAN, we're talking about the entire WAN edge. And that WAN edge has the routers that are in place that need to be replaced. You need to extend the security perimeter, so you need a security appliance at each one of the SD-WAN sites, or have security integrated with the solution. You need WAN optimization in many cases. Plus, you need to orchestrate all this and have analytics. And the next thing is that, as I talked about the software-defined enterprise, what they quickly realize is that this is not just isolated to the branch. It starts at the branch. However, they want it extended to all parts of the network. They want to go from the branch to remote access users, how to get to the campus and the data center, and to all the cloud instances. So the SASE model comes up across the conversations as we extend the architecture out, extend the profile out and the place in the network out to other places.
And Kelly, this is really the vision where, the businesses and customer case studies that you'll review today, and most every other business they're on this journey towards really an end-to-end software-defined enterprise that extends, as you say, not just into the branch, campus, private data center, but into the cloud. And then, the SASE model of having, and you'll talk about this, but the light branch or a heavy branch all the way up into maybe a light cloud, heavy cloud model, and having the flexibility to do that. And that really kind of creates that end-to-end model that these enterprises really need the flexibility to implement, isn't it?
That's right, Mike. And if you take a look at SASE, it's really the combination of network and security, and combining both and putting it in one or the other place or both places to really meet the needs and requirements of an enterprise. So yes, absolutely. As we go through the case studies, we'll try and tie into each one of the case study what sort of SASE model the enterprise is moving towards.
So Kelly, get us started.
So why don't we get started?
I'm excited.
Great. Let's get started. Well, the first case study that I have is of the financial vertical. Now, luckily we've been fortunate enough to have a tremendous amount of experience in the financial vertical, having many customers. Now, while I can't speak specifically about a particular customer, what I've done is I've looked at across all the different customers that we're dealing with in this vertical and put together a case study which kind of reflects what most of these folks are doing. So let me take the example of one financial services company, which is a Global 150 customer. They have about 1,000 branches and about 80 corporate offices. And their network in place was really multiple MPLS links to each branch, and they needed the multiple links for redundancy. And then the topology of the network was really from the branch to a data center. And the connectivity out to the internet, to the cloud, was really through a centralized the security appliance at going out to the internet. But when you looked inside the branch, they had about 4 to 6 appliances in the branch because of redundancy. And these, what I'm talking about here, Mike, is only wide area network and security appliances, nothing else. So the challenges they were having is the following, which is, you know, they're a very aggressive sort of a financial services company, and they needed to roll out more sites faster. They had a big digital project going on where they wanted to kind of drive the existing branches to be more digitized as well, and the customer experiences while they're in the branches to be digitized. But they were facing challenge because every time they started to open up a new site, it took them a long time. In fact, getting a circuit in place, an MPLS circuit in place, could be anywhere from 3 months to a lot longer, depending upon the location and the site that they were in. The second thing is that to create this digitized experience in the branch, they wanted to roll out guest Wi-Fi. However, they didn't want guest Wi-Fi to be going across their corporate MPLS VPN network because of, one, security concerns, second, cost concerns. So they wanted to actually build out a guest Wi-Fi infrastructure, but the architecture they were going with was creating a cost and complexity for a completely separate infrastructure that they had to manage, which was connected to the internet directly. The third thing was they noticed that as they actually rolled out this guest Wi-Fi infrastructure in a few places, the experience that the employees at the branches were getting on the guest Wi-Fi network was actually a lot better to access cloud and SaaS applications. The reason is because the picture, as you see up there, the corporate users were getting onto the MPLS backbone or MPLS VPN circuit, which had connectivity to the internet, which was centralized. But the guest Wi-Fi network allowed them to go directly to the internet from the branch. Now, while this was going on, they also became concerned about, you know, security, but also compliance reasons, because for compliance reasons, they needed to isolate, you know, the retail banking from the wealth management and other departments. And the only way they could do that in the current architecture was racking and stacking more appliances. And it was just getting too cumbersome, expensive, and too costly to do that. So what did they do? Well, we've been working with them for many years, and here's what we've done. They've actually deployed dual Versa secure SD-WAN nodes at each branch, at each data center, and each corporate site. And by doing that, they've eliminated several appliances that they had. They no longer need a branch router. They actually have incorporated a firewall, next-gen firewall, into the same appliance. In fact, the same architecture they've been actually using even for work from home. And because we're actually able to support multiple transports, they've actually been able to roll out the sites much quicker by deploying LTE embedded into the appliances, as well as getting just any broadband that they can. And that's really helped them speed up the time it takes for them to turn up new sites. The third thing is that they've been able to leverage all different types of WAN that are available. In many cases, they've actually they've maintained the MPLS circuit, at least one, and they've added more broadband circuits as well as having LTE. And they've increased the capacity that they have per branch for being able to use for different customers and traffic types. By leveraging the multi-tenancy capability of the Versa operating system, they've been able to isolate different types of traffic. They've got guest Wi-Fi traffic onto the same infrastructure at the branch as they have the corporate traffic, but they use this multi-tenancy capability to isolate and segment the guest Wi-Fi traffic and punt that directly onto the internet link, and take the corporate traffic and put that onto the MPLS link if that's the policy that they need. But not only that, they've been able to identify ATM traffic from teller traffic and from wealth management and isolate those segments as well. One of the key things that they were looking for is internet connectivity, as I mentioned, at each one of these locations requires you to now protect that enterprise perimeter, because the enterprise perimeter has extended from the corporate location where you had the next-gen firewall to every location where you're now putting internet. And by leveraging the integrated security next-gen firewall inside the Versa operating system, they've been able to provide inbound security as well as enabling distributed internet breakout at each one of the locations. And that's allowed them to achieve a lot of benefits. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems to be a common theme where, as I roll out SD-WAN, certainly branch offices, the key area for deployment of the technology, but I really opened myself up in terms of security, threat surface, if you will, and so that security at the edge is essential in this and other cases.
Exactly, indeed. And one of the things that's a clear differentiator for us as Versa is the embedded next-gen firewall functionality that we have. And that really helps most of these enterprises, and you'll see that come across each one of these case studies. So why don't we move to the next example and talk about a retailer. Now, again, we're working with several retailers globally, but I picked an example of one that is a global company which has over 1,000 stores as well as hub locations, and the hubs are either regional offices or distribution centers, etc. Their prior network was really 2 links, but they were operating as an active and a standby link from the store to the data center. Now, there are a few things going on. One is that as they're expanding their business, they're digitizing the user experience, both in-store and out-of-store. They want to try and create more interaction between the stores as well. So in addition to having the data center to store traffic, they also had store-to-store connectivity needs as well. The security was being provided through a centralized architecture where either at the hubs or at the corporate office or data centers, they had all the stores connecting to these locations, and from there they were getting access to the internet. So more of a centralized but a distributed centralized environment for this global network. And lastly, in retail, everyone knows that they're very cost conscious and margin conscious and space conscious. So they had multiple appliances and a rack and stack of appliances in each store, and they typically didn't have redundancy in this case. Why? Because they were cost conscious. Now, as they're moving more towards a digital area, and digital transformation is big in this particular customer, they actually had a few key things that they were trying to solve for. One, they wanted to converge both the experience in the store as well as out of the store into one look and feel. And they wanted, as the users came into the store, they wanted them to have that same experience that they would getting out to the internet if they were outside the store, but also try and merge the in-store experience so they could drive preference inside the store to get the customer to buy things. Now, by doing this, they also needed to be able to isolate the point-of-sale traffic, which is extremely high-value traffic for a retailer. Why? Because if you're standing in line and it's taking too long to process the transaction, there's a likelihood that you might just say, you know what, this is taking too long, I got to go and walk away. So getting that high-value point-of-sale traffic reliably and across and processing it quickly was something that was very important for them. For this particular customer, they had a lot of standby circuits, which really meant that they weren't using those standby circuits at all given time, and that was inefficient use of all the capacity they had deployed. And lastly, again, as part of the digitization, they were rolling out guest Wi-Fi model, and the same thing that they were looking at, which is I have my corporate or back office network, and I needed a guest Wi-Fi network. So they were about to replicate more equipment, rack and stack of equipment, which was a problem because they didn't have space inside the telecom closets to do so. So what is it that they've done and what they've been able to achieve? Well, similar approach, they've taken dual Versa secure SD-WAN nodes, and by doing that, they've eliminated multiple appliances. They've eliminated the routers, they've added functionality for security in each one of the stores, and in one case, they wanted to add third-party applications inside the store, for which they would have had to put in servers. But using the Versa operating system architecture, where we can host third-party VNFs directly on our software, they were able to eliminate the need for additional external appliances. Not only that, because we've been able to converge all of these functions into a single appliance, they were able to use 2 appliances and add redundancy to the store, which was very important for them going forward for business continuity reasons. The other thing is that they use the Versa operating system to identify, then isolate, and then segment the point-of-sale traffic, where it's not just the management, but even the control plane for the point of sale traffic is isolated. And then, of course, the data plane is carved off to be able to give that the right level of priority. So all of this allowed them to be able to use the capability of the infrastructure to provide guarantee for delivering that point of sale traffic. Now, in cases where they have active links, because in many places, high capacity places, they have active links, they're leveraging the ability to do packet replication, where this high value traffic is replicated across both links. And in cases where there's failures, they automatically turn on forward error correction to make sure that if a packet gets lost in transit, it can be recovered at the other end. So more efficiency, more reliability for the point of sale traffic as they needed. Now, leveraging the integrated security that we provide, they're also able to protect each store, which is now opened up to not one, but multiple internet connections. And they're able to protect that from the inbound threats that might be coming their way, as well as enable internet breakout in a distributed fashion as well. Pretty interesting, right, Mike?
It certainly is. And, you know, another thing that I found interesting about this is the SASE model that they took. It was a light edge and heavy cloud model. And you look at that compared to the Global 150 financial services company you talked about before this, where they had a heavy edge and a light cloud. So, you know, there's these varying degrees of SASE that are really being implemented by these businesses.
That's right, Mike. And you know, you're going to see that that SASE model permeate across each one of these examples. And you know, candidly, to us it doesn't really matter, because some customers, depending upon their business needs, may need that light edge and a heavy cloud, and others may need a heavy edge and a light cloud. And for us, it's just a simple configuration, which customer uses what. All right, why don't we move on to the next example then, Mike? And that is of a technology and a services company. Now, you know, we have several customers in this category, but I've decided to pick one that is very interesting. Why? Because while they don't have a lot of locations, each location is very large. They have R&D centers, they have a cloud-based business, they rely heavily on cloud for a lot of their development efforts, as well as their products and services that they go sell into the market. And their network topology was high capacity, dual MPLS links, primarily for site-to-site traffic, meaning site, meaning like a corporate location in one country to another, but also to a data center. But all the connectivity to the internet was centralized through a single connection or multiple connections, and the security was provided at these locations. And in some cases, they're actually using their regional hubs to get out to the internet. Now, when we looked at their WAN and security architecture, they had routers, they had WAN optimization devices, they even had some zone-based firewalls. So they were at about 6 to 8 WAN and security appliances per site. And then, of course, there was redundancy. That meant there was more than that. Now, what were their challenges? Well, what they found was that a lot of their users, a lot of their development environments was moving to cloud. So the user experience to put stuff in cloud or get access to stuff in cloud was very important for them. And again, using that centralized sort of access to the internet to get to cloud was a challenge that they wanted to figure out how to overcome. And candidly, they were lacking visibility, granular visibility into the user, what application they were using, and which circuit the application was going on, to be able to quickly and effectively troubleshoot and rectify any reactive situations, but also proactively make sure that the users are getting the right experience for the right capability. The other thing was, as I said, they're moving heavily towards cloud, so they wanted to kind of migrate the infrastructure from a site-to-site and a site-to-internet standpoint and site-to-cloud, all in the same, but also they had a cloud-to-cloud implementation emerging as well, where they were using Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, and they wanted to have even those cloud instances connected together with a virtual topology that was tied to the rest of the corporate network. And lastly, you know, the cost of capital, the operational cost, and circuits and all the and appliances was just continuing to add up as they rolled out the network. So we started to work with them, and here's what they've been able to achieve. Today, they now have dual Versa secure SD-WAN nodes at each one of these locations. And by doing that, they've been able to eliminate the routers that they had in place. They've been able to add SD-WAN and security for each one of the sites. And they're doing it at over 10 gigabits per second performance. Why? Because the architecture of the Versa operating system allows us to do this so efficiently. And we have appliances that range from hundreds of megs or lower to tens of gigabits per second of throughput per site, including routing, SD-WAN, as well as next-gen firewall capability. Now, along with that, they actually, in this case, migrated from MPLS to dedicated internet connections at each location, and they were able to use those internet connections to build their overall topology, the overlay network between sites, but also they leveraged the same software that they're putting on their branches and put it into their cloud instances to build this site-to-cloud connectivity as well. Now, again, as in other cases, they've been able to leverage Versa's integrated security to be able to protect that internet perimeter that they're connecting to each location, as well as enabling the breakout of traffic that's more interesting for them. And that's been very important. And let me give you the specific example of that, Mike, because before we got there, the example they gave us is their users in one remote country location would try to get onto the corporate network to access Office 365. But the application performance was not very good. Why? Because that traffic was going from that remote country into their corporate office in the US, where they had connectivity to the internet, and only to take that traffic all the way back into the same remote country where the Office 365 instance was. So very challenging in terms of user experience, but now what they're able to do is now they're able to take that Office 365 traffic in that country and connect it directly to that Office 365 instance in that country by breaking it out directly to the internet.
And pretty interesting. So to your point, it certainly is. And you mentioned that this particular high technology firm, Fortune 500 company, uses a lot of cloud services. They use a lot of SaaS and cloud services, cloud storage, cloud data. But their implementation, their SASE implementation, was more of a heavy edge, a heavier branch office presence and a lighter cloud presence. And it's important to understand what that means. That doesn't mean that they're not using a lot of cloud services, but they're not maybe using as much of the networking and security capabilities that can be delivered in the cloud. They're doing much more of that at the edge and in the branch office. They're certainly leveraging the distributed system of Versa cloud gateways that are distributed around the globe, but maybe they're activating more services at the edge inside the branch than they are in those Versa cloud gateways for things like security and other functionality. But they could go either way, right? I mean, they could slide that scale back and forth.
That's right, Mike. And interestingly enough, even this is a great example of a customer that while they have these corporate locations where they're using gigabits of throughput per site, they're also using the same software to put into appliances that are going into employees' homes, and they're creating that employees' homes is being connected to the overlay network, the secure overlay network, because they've been concerned about the additional, let's call it the perimeter that's opening up by having their employees work from home. So again, they're extending the perimeter of the enterprise beyond the corporate offices to the employees' homes, and then protecting that as well. All right, good. Well, let's continue, Mike, to the next example. And while I'm taking a little breather, I'd like to encourage the audience to keep giving us questions. I'm trying to answer some of the ones that came up, but please keep them coming, and we'll be able to happily be able to answer them. Now, the next example is that of a healthcare and a biotech firm. Now, we've had a lot of experience working with many partners with this sector, and traditionally this sector has been not a leading, but more of a follower. But we're actually starting to see a lot of customers in the biotech healthcare sector move very quickly to digitizing their infrastructure. So the one example I picked off was a Fortune 1000 company that has about 150 global corporate locations. And their network architecture was very similar to everybody else, which is dual MPLS links that were connecting each one of the sites to the headquarters, and then they were taking traffic from that headquarter through a firewall and then going out to a cloud security infrastructure for outbound traffic. And they were very keen on making sure that that cloud security infrastructure was scrubbing all the outbound traffic. At each one of the locations, they had multiple WAN and security appliances that included routers, WAN optimization, and also some zone-based firewalls that they needed to isolate the traffic locally. So when we got there, we asked the customer what was the challenges they were facing. And very similar to one of the other use cases, they were kind of struggling with this user experience of cloud apps. And as we dug further, what we realized is that much like there is a centralized hop to the internet to get to those cloud applications for remote users in every other case, this had the same effect. Even though they were using a cloud security model, their topology of the network was connecting to that cloud security through a centralized on-ramp. And we see that many times with customers. So not only are you kind of centralizing the hub and spoke model, and then you're going to another hub and spoke model where you can only go to the cloud security instance, which isn't available everywhere. So you got to go where those cloud security instances are. So that was one challenge they were having. The second thing is that they were facing some issues, and they were concerned about security, where the inbound connections from these locations, inbound security threats, what they wanted to protect against. And they weren't able to get granularity of users, visibility, as well as application and circuits. Now, they actually were considering moving to internet at every location, and that's when I mentioned they were concerned about the security at each one of these branches, not from outbound traffic, because the outbound traffic they felt good about protecting that with the cloud security service that they had, but really that internet perimeter at each one of these locations where they placed this was now open to the internet for inbound attacks, so they needed to kind of make sure they cover that. And the cost and complexity in this environment was pretty high, and interestingly enough, the data that the customer shared with me on the spend per head in the company was one of the highest that I've seen across many organizations. So what were we able to do with this customer? Well, first of all, we proposed an architecture to them, and we shared with them the benefits. But everything else aside, they got so enamored by the cost savings that they were going to get that they implemented the entire network within 90 days. Within 90 days, they had global sites turning on and deploying the infrastructure because they wanted to get to the cost savings and the capability that they were getting. So what did they deploy? Well, they took dual versus secure SD-WAN nodes, which collapsed, again, like every other example, the routing infrastructure, adding SD-WAN to each location, and adding a next-gen firewall. They used whatever connections they could get access to, and in some cases, they were using both MPLS and dedicated internet circuits at each location, or dual internet connections if MPLS was taking too long. But the key thing is that they distributed the connectivity to the internet for all locations. And while they continued to use the cloud security service, they were able to protect each one of these locations from the threats, inbound threats that they would get. And this has become, a great example for us, Mike, and this customer is extremely happy.
Yeah, and this is a good example of, this balance almost between security in the cloud and security on premises, and being able to coexist and deliver both of those, and ensure to meet the security policies and profile and network requirements within the business, and for the SecOps team and NetOps team. So interesting SASE model, there when you look at the heavy edge like cloud, but still the security aspects are really split between the two.
That's right. That's right. Now, interestingly enough, they also have LTE backup at each one of the locations, and this customer, they decided to use appliances that have embedded LTE functionality in it. So all they need to do is plug in a SIM card to use that. But one of the questions that came up is, how will this work with 5G? So, candidly, in this case, 5G is essentially just an access mechanism. So for Versa, that's just another transport that we can connect to and drive across as a WAN transport. And because we have the ability to measure the performance of each one of the links, whether it's a 4G, 5G, a broadband internet, or an MPLS connection, we'll know exactly what the latency and jitter and all the traffic capabilities are, and then use the right link for that purpose. We've already had many of our customers try out our products with 5G services that they're getting from carriers, and we've been able to demonstrate very high performance for those failover connections. But also in some cases, many of our customers are considering using that as a primary access mechanism as well. All right, I see some of the questions coming in, which is great. I think this is very good. Let's go to the next one as we go to the next example, and I'll cover a couple more of the other questions. The last example that I have is that of logistics and the distribution case study. And this is a fascinating one. Why? Because this is a global 100 company with thousands of global locations and distribution sites. They're both an online retailer, which has brick and mortar stuff as well, and they need to. Then the brick and mortar is for both for retail as well as distribution capability. So very, very interesting customer. And until we got there, what their connectivity and topology was, and by the way, they're very, very cloud-centric business, extremely cloud-centric business, and they want to do anything and everything they can in the cloud. But their topology of the network was internet locations at most locations. Some sites, the key value sites, were connected via MPLS, and the topology of the network was hub and spoke from all these distribution sites into these hub locations, and the hub locations were then connected to cloud as well as to each other using MPLS and internet. Security posture was all centralized at these regional hubs, and in each one of the locations they had a 1 to 3 appliances depending upon the size and the location of the business. So what were their challenges? Well, as I said, they're a very cloud-centric organization, but they found themselves building brick and mortar physical infrastructure at each one of the hub locations, which was something that they just couldn't understand, but also it slowed them down from the speed at which they need to move. And they're very focused on speed of global deployment because the business is expanding. The second thing was that they weren't being able to get any granularity of the traffic from the environments, which was important for them to be able to distinguish real value traffic versus non-real value traffic. And the specific example I'll give you is that the customer told us that at one location, they realized that the application performance for business critical stuff was slow. What they didn't realize is that there was people inside the distribution center that were playing Spotify music and putting that across that same link going out to the internet, which was slowing down the business critical traffic. So by leveraging a solution that can give them the ability to identify that traffic, isolate that traffic, and treat it differently is what they were looking for. And lastly, they found that because the business is expanding globally, they couldn't get MPLS services everywhere. Heck, in some cases, they couldn't even get broadband internet fast enough. So they needed the flexibility to be able to use LTE for rapid deployment, have multiple transports, have whatever transport they needed at whatever time they needed. So let's see what we've been able to do for them. Well, this customer is actually deploying dual Versa secure SD-WAN nodes, much like every other example, and they've collapsed their routing, SD-WAN, as well as security infrastructure, but also they had some interesting needs for smaller sites where they were finding themselves putting another switch. So they're using the Versa's integrated switching, L2 switching functionality in software to be able to connect their local devices together, which was a very important thing for them to be able to do local printouts, sending traffic back and forth without having to go out to the corporate environment in the data center. The other thing is that they've been able to take multiple transports, whatever they can get, whether it's a 3G, 4G, or LTE, or multiple internet access, and provide the connectivity to the site that's best available and gives them the capacity that they need. Because many of these locations are everywhere and they can't get the high capacity circuits. One of the most important things for them was to be able to move quickly with the speed of deployment, and they have a huge existing automation infrastructure that they use in their environment. So by leveraging virtualized hubs, which is same software, Versa operating system software, and deploying it in a virtual environment in the cloud, as well as taking our control and management, putting that in the cloud, they're able to move much, much faster, extremely fast, and be able to reduce their annual cost, improve the availability, and reduce the number of devices at each location. And we're just getting started with this customer, and they've got a lot of sites to go still deploy. Pretty interesting, right, Mike?
Yeah, it certainly is. This is clearly a powerhouse in terms of both online and physical logistics. The one interesting thing here is that even though they're utilizing a SASE type model, there's still a clear requirement to have an anchor in the branch offices. There's always got to be something there anchoring with secure SD-WAN and security capabilities, at a minimum, there, even though, as you've said, that they're a very cloud-centric business and heavy cloud model. So I just thought that was very interesting, that no matter what, any SASE model requires that anchor within the branch, and there's got to be capabilities there to support that.
That's right, Mike. And another couple of questions that came in while I was presenting this, but one of them was, cloud gateways. Does Versa have cloud gateways, and what do they do? Well, of course we have cloud gateways, but we have one better thing than traditional cloud gateways. We have our own gateways that customers can use, but this customer, as I mentioned, wanted to build their own air-gap solution in their own environment, so they're actually deploying their own cloud gateways and leveraging those to be able to do what they want. And what do these gateways do? Well, these gateways allow you to do, kind of a hub and spoke topology for traffic if you want to centralize some of the security function. So, for example, some of our financial customers and these types of customers that have maybe kiosks or, even a machine where you can buy stuff when you're at an airport, they don't want to necessarily have security at that particular site, but they want all that traffic to come into a particular location and scrub the traffic there. So there may be Versa at both ends of that link. One could be at the kiosk or ATM machine, the second one could be at the hub location or cloud gateway location, but the security functions being applied at the cloud gateway. And then from that gateway, you can either go into the corporate network, into the overlay network, and in some cases, if there is a need or if you want to offer guest Wi-Fi at that location, you can take that traffic and punt it off to the internet, that cloud gateway, or connect it to the existing domain. So very, very versatile and capable architecture. So, there's a few other questions that I'll cover in the next slide, Mike, that I've seen come up, and I have answers to them, but please be patient until the next slide. So if it's okay, Mike, let's maybe talk about a quick summary and what this means and how some of the questions that are coming up we can actually bring back and circle back the answers to. So first of all,
yeah, I think that would be great, Kelly. I think an important aspect here is tying in, helping people to understand the tie between secure SD-WAN and sort of that as the tip of the spear, and then the application across these SASE models and SASE technology.
Yeah, right, Mike. As we talked about before, SASE is really about a secure access services edge. So it's both about the network and services that the network needs to provide, and really merging together, and using the capability at the right place at the right time for the right product, for the right topology and the right network. So let's talk about some of the reasons why what customers are doing and why this happens. What we help customers with is, one, we simplify the WAN edge. How do we do that? Well, we eliminate the appliance sprawl, and by combining routing, all the networking services like NAT, carrier-grade NAT, DHCP server relay, the deep packet inspection function, so you can actually get application monitor and network monitoring capability, along with, if the appliance has a Wi-Fi access point or an LTE embedded, leveraging that, and security, and even software-based switching, all of it in one. In addition, we're also able to host third-party functions and applications on top of our software, where we run bare metal, and we can be the guest, the host, or the guest, but if we're the host, you can actually put a third-party application right on top of our infrastructure, and we can service chain that together. Additionally, we provide the most flexible configurations and topologies, where if you have, say, dual devices, and most of our customers do this today, at a particular store, or a branch, or an office, you may have one transport coming into one box and another transport coming into the other box. And then those boxes are connected together, those appliances are connected together. But the network works seamless. We have completely full reliability, both in terms of network as well as security. We do have stateful functionality where you can have an application running in only one appliance, but not in the second appliance, because you don't want to pay 2 licenses for that. If it's a third-party application, we can even configure those functions. So very, very versatile and very, very capable. The next thing is, because we have all of this capability built in, we're able to fit into any existing environment, where we can be the underlay and the overlay in the same, not just appliance, but in the same software. And that is a huge benefit that our customers rely upon us for. And not only that, we're actually able to seamlessly provide connectivity between the current world, which is a non-SD-WAN world, to an SD-WAN world. Now, one of the questions that came up that I want to answer is about multi-tenancy. Why is multi-tenancy needed, and why it's different, and how we're different from the competition? Well, first of all, the Versa operating system is really a cloud-native multi-tenant software from ground up. When our founding team, as well as our engineers, built it, they built this multi-tenancy from ground up, and they were able to now isolate not only management plane, which is what most vendors do today. You can have a separate control plane per instance or per segment. And you can have topologies that are different per instance, per segment. So why is this important, right? Let me take an example of a bank again. In a bank, I may have ATM machines, which may have a different topology need than the retail banking versus the wealth management versus other corporate functions that might be at that branch or distribution center. Each one can have a different logical topology on the same software infrastructure and the same hardware infrastructure. One of the most common use cases I hear about from customers where they leverage this multi-tenancy is really to isolate different segments in traffic, as I talked about guest Wi-Fi. The other most common one is UCaaS traffic. As we know, a lot of customers are leveraging unified communication as a service from one of the many cloud vendors that are out there. And they want to be able to send that traffic directly from the branch to the UCaaS cloud. And most other architectures that are out there today in SD-WAN don't allow you to do that. They take all the traffic at that remote site, force you to bring it to some gateway, whether it's your own or a hosted gateway in the cloud, and then based on the mercy of that cloud provider, you're now able to go to the closest gateway that UCaaS provider has. And this is like a piece of cake for us, is to be able to identify UCaaS traffic, isolate it, and send it directly to that UCaaS provider. By the way, the same example applies for Microsoft Azure, because Microsoft Azure is telling customers, hey, don't send your traffic, in any other path, just send it to us directly, etc. So that becomes very important. So hopefully that answers the question about multi-tenancy. And by the way, it is better than anyone in the industry. So the other thing that we're able, go ahead, Mike.
Well, Kelly, I'm very interested also in just hearing, how does actually Versa do all of this, and what does that that model look like for for the Versa implementation? Of course, after you discuss some of these other points.
Yeah, sure, happy to do that. Let me kind of go through this the third and the fourth parts, which is we're a software-based company. We've been built for the cloud as well as on-premise, but we've used many of the cloud principles. We're fully open in terms of both the underlay that we can sit on, whether it's any hypervisor, any virtualized environment, any cloud environment, and also we're very open on the northbound, which is through our REST APIs. So any one of our customers can leverage those APIs and integrate us into their environments or their existing IT management systems or their analytics or security systems. But we provide a single pane of glass for complete visibility and full automated control of all the applications, network, and security elements. And we provide contextual visibility. I can tell you if I'm running my network right now, Mike, and if I log into our management station, that it's you and what you're doing and how many flows you have running and which flow is getting what kind of performance, which is not possible to get in many of the systems out there. Or if it is, you have to bolt on additional appliances, additional systems to try and get that. And the most important thing that we hear from customers is that our market-leading security implementation that we have is actually fundamental to them being able to achieve direct internet breakout and also protect that enterprise perimeter as they expand the enterprise perimeter to providing internet connectivity everywhere. Remember what I talked about early on, which is if applications are moving to cloud and SaaS, the internet is the on-ramp, and that on-ramp is getting expanded to all locations in the enterprise. And as you do that, you've got to secure those not just for the outbound, but for the inbound. Mike, I hope that provides both you and the users some insights into examples of customers and why we cover them. Should we go through some of the questions and things that you want to cover after?
Absolutely. Let's do that. Again, we appreciate everybody's questions coming in. And Kelly, thank you so much for answering some of these as you were presenting. That was fantastic. So again, if you have any questions, please enter them by clicking the Ask a Question tab below your screen, and we'll begin going through these now. So let's see, some of these you answered. I think one question here, thanks for the interesting use cases. What are the top use cases today for SD-WAN globally, and which use cases has Versa found to be the strongest in terms of ROI and TCO, return on investment and total cost of ownership? So a lot of that data, Kelly, you included in a number of these, a number of the slides there, but are there any particular use cases that you kind of see as some of the strongest ROIs out there, whether it's the type of business or industry or whatever it might be?
Well, it's kind of interesting because ROI can be measured in many different ways if you're an enterprise, and primarily it's what have I been spending up until now, and how do I save money on what I've been spending, but also I've got to roll out these new things. So for many of our customers in the retail vertical, for example, as they're digitizing, it's more about getting a lot more for the same. And in other customers' cases, it's actually saving money. So for example, one of the examples that I had around the technology company, they were able to save $19 million over 5 years as a TCO. And that's huge benefit, cost benefit advantage. But the biggest ROI that most of our customers get is that they're able to take their current resources and put them to use on new things that they need to do, as opposed to managing and maintaining and operating statically what they were able to do before. An example is one of our customers just recently upgraded their 1,000 site network, 1,000 device network, and they were able to do that in a single maintenance window and in over three-hour window with 2 people. Now that scale of implementation and upgrade in a prior generation environment would take you years, and guess what? By the time you finish that upgrade, you'd be on to planning and executing on the next upgrade. So the automation, the effectiveness of the resources, that's hard to measure, but it's tremendously beneficial for most of our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the other areas that I think in terms of use cases are really the convergence of the comprehensive integration of all these capabilities, the routing, the SD-WAN, the security. I think in the beginning with SD-WAN, there were a number of enterprises that rolled out SD-WAN, but they ended up finding that they had, instead of reduction in number of appliances, they were adding yet another appliance to the mix, and so they had to train somebody on that new appliance in addition to the router and the security. Bringing all those things into one single software stack with one genuine management interface. I've heard businesses say, I now don't have to train multiple people to do multiple different boxes and things like that. It's just one system. So
that's right. And Mike, you're absolutely right, which is being able to kind of take out a router and being able to avoid putting a firewall at that site by having an embedded firewall capability, next-gen firewall capability. It really helps our customers move things very quickly, effectively, cost-effectively, and single pane and flash management with one single company helps their support costs as well.
Okay, so the next question is, and we'll take a few more of these, as many as we can up until the end, was how can you get to 3 to 4x bandwidth capacity? I look back and I think this was a Fortune 500 high-tech firm that you had talked about in terms of the...
Yes.
Yeah, how do they do that?
Sure, absolutely. So, their existing environment was like 100 meg MPLS connection at each one of the locations. What they did is they actually went from that to 500 meg in a lot of locations, and even a gig bandwidth with dedicated internet access in many locations. And in a lot of our customers, what they do is instead of having one or two small speed connections, like say for example a two 50 meg MPLS connections or a 10 meg MPLS connection, they're now able to move to an MPLS connection, which might stay, and the second connection they can go up to 100 meg for a lot lower price, and they're able to combine these actual both the bandwidth that is available and then achieve those kind of capacity increases. So that's a very easy, simple math that most of our customers go through from economics as well as performance capability. But keep in mind that a lot of these customers are moving to dedicated internet access as their preferred path, and they may use the typical consumer broadband as well, but they may not use that as a primary. They may use that for a backup.
So that actually ties into this another question that came in, which is, are these customers using MPLS? And I think it's pretty clear many of them were using MPLS before, and many are using after. What's sort of what are you seeing in terms of after implementing secure SD-WAN? They continue to leverage MPLS. Obviously internet.
Right.
What's your assessment?
Well, it varies by customer, Mike. I've seen several verticals, for example, financial, where they're going to continue to have MPLS in their network for a while. They may not have as much of it. They may not have 2 circuits for every site. They may go down to 1 because they want to have the assurance and build that confidence that what they can do with internet connectivity and topology for their VPN is as reliable and has the same SLA characteristics as they would get with MPLS. So I think that's more of a transition state, but in certain other verticals, like for example, many of the retailers going down to the branches, they may not have any MPLS at all. They maybe just all internet. And if they have internet, they may not go to MPLS. They may just stick with internet as it is today.
Okay. A couple of security questions. One is, can Versa provide redundancy for next-gen firewall?
Absolutely. Stateful, yes.
Okay, great. And then a question here on actually point-of-sale traffic. How do you identify POS traffic, point-of-sale traffic?
Oh, good question. So, Versa operating system has a built-in full DPI engine where we have signatures for around, I think, 3,000 or over 3,000 applications, signatures. So we can identify these applications, and you can have policy established for what to do for that application. Now, if there is some application that is not part of that over 3,000 signature library, you can also define custom application signatures, and then we can identify that application and do apply whatever policy is required.
Great. A couple of questions on cloud. The first one is, how does this work with Office 365? That's I think a pretty common
extremely
question.
Well. It makes Office 365 better because we can take Office 365 traffic and direct your users to the cloud at whichever point you'd like to do. You can go directly from the branch to Office 365. You can bring it to the corporate office. You can go to cloud gateways, whichever way you'd like. So very, very effective for Office 365.
Great, and then there's also the leverage of the distributed system of Versa cloud gateways around the globe that help to bookend or at the front doorstep of these cloud services that help in terms of security, but also performance. Okay. Another cloud question, Kelly, and probably have time for one, maybe two more, but what do you do for multi-cloud?
What do we do for multi-cloud? Well, as I said before, Versa was born for the cloud era, and we're a multi-cloud operating system. So, we have virtual instances, virtual images that we can put inside each one of these multi-clouds, and you can build a topology across your cloud instances, just like you would an overlay network with SD-WAN to the branches. But if you have both, then you can connect that network in your corporate or a branch network along with that multi-cloud network. And now you have a complete overlay, which you can then still segment and connect those all together. I don't know, Mike, if that helps. I'm trying to answer it quickly because we're running out of time.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. Thank you, Kelly. So again, I'd like to remind people this has been recorded and it will be available immediately afterwards to view on demand. If you missed any part of this, please help yourself to downloading the presentation itself along with 3 case studies. Kelly, thank you very much. It's been great having you on the broadcast here, and I really thank you for your time and your knowledge that you've shared.
Thank you, Mike, for the time for you and the audience to listen. And if you do have any questions for us that we haven't been able to answer, feel free to reach out to us or our teams